I love sitting around the fire. It's pleasurable, comforting. I love to sit out here and pray. It's one of my favorite things to do and think. You know, if you take this same fire, though, and you put it in on your couch, your carpet, it's destructive. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with the fire, it's just in the wrong place. Sex is like fire. God created sex to be enjoyed in the fireplace of marriage. And outside of that fireplace, it's destructive. It will burn you and your partner. God designed it in this fireplace. It is a good thing within inside the fireplace of marriage. The question we have to answer is, are we going to invite God into our sex life? If you're single, that means inviting him into your life as a single person. If you're married, are you going to invite him into those desires within your marriage? If you have hurts and pains from bad decisions of the past or experiences, are you willing to invite him into those hurts and wounds?
Welcome Church Online. Glad you guys are here as we start this new series called Pure Sex. I've had a lot of people preparing for this say, this is kind of like a how-to thing. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing on the weekends. However, for those of you who want to delve into things a little more, Kathy and I, my wife and I, are going to be doing a sex seminar for it's called How to Have Great Sex in Your Marriage, and we're going to do that on March 11th at 5 p.m. So you can start signing up for that. In this series, though, Pure Sex, we're going to talk about biblical truth, what the Bible says about sex. You know, God created us as sexual beings. It's a physical thing. It's a relational thing and a spiritual thing. And we want to really talk this weekend as we launch into this, how those things are not separate. They're not separate areas of our lives. Now, what's amazing is how uncomfortable people are when it comes to talking about sex. And some of you are even, I'm just amazed at how our sign made so many people uncomfortable, like, oh, those feet. And I'm like, they're just feet, man. Really? I mean, just 8-foot feet. But I mean, I get that, and we're so uncomfortable about it. Here's what I'd love for you to do. Take out your phones and text me, because we're so uncomfortable, we don't talk to our kids about it. I want to know if your parents talked to you about it. Did they have the talk with you? And I want to know how it went. Was it good, bad, indifferent? Did you like it, hate it? How did it go? I heard a story this week from a pastor. He did not want to talk to his kids about sex. And his young daughter came up to him one day. They had a cat. He has 6 kids. They had a cat. The cat's name is Cutie Pie. This is a true story. If it weren't true, I'd come up with a better ending. But Cutie Pie was the cat, and the cat was pregnant. And the little girl, she's 4 or 5 years old, said, "Daddy, how did Cutie Pie get pregnant?" He said, "Well, honey, God just made her body ready to be pregnant." And he's saying, as he's telling the story, he says, "I just didn't want to have the talk with her." And she said, "Well, God made her body," you know, kids won't drop it, will they? "God made her body ready to get pregnant, but didn't she need some help?" He goes, "Yes, she needed some help." And then the little girl said, "Well, is that why our neighbor's cat, that black cat, came over last night when Cutie Pie was moaning?" And he goes, "Yes, he came over to help her." And the little girl wouldn't drop it. He's like, "I don't want to have this talk with her, you know." And finally, and she says, "Well, how did he help her get pregnant?" And the dad said, "Well, look, God made her body ready to get pregnant. The neighbor's black cat came over to help her, and they just looked at each other, and she got pregnant." I mean, that's the talk for him, you know. Well, knowing they had 6 kids, the little girl is thinking about this and processing it for a few days. A few days later, she came back to him and said, "Dad, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but when I go to school, I'm the only one that our family has 6 kids. We have a lot more kids in our family than other families." He goes, "Yeah, I know that." And she said, "Maybe you should quit looking at Mom the way you do." So I'm not sure how your parents have talked to you or how you're talking to your kids if you're a parent. And more important, in the church, how are we talking about it? You know, because a lot of times we're just afraid to talk about it. And yet, the Bible talks a lot about it because God is the creator of sex. Now, I have an assumption, and I realized this preparing for this week, that some of you may not agree with this assumption. So you need to know where I'm coming from, and I put it in your notes. That is, God is for sex. He's pro-sex. He's the creator of sex. I want you to say that with me. Join me online. Say it as well. God is for... Oh, come on. You guys are so afraid to say that, some of you. Let's say it. God is for sex. We know He's pro-sex because He created sex. In fact, the first commandment that He gave to human beings had to do with sex. A lot of people say, yeah, but God created sex for procreation. Well, that's not exactly true. If you go back and study the Genesis story, that's a part of it, but the first and foremost thing that He created sex for was not procreation. It was for pleasure and intimacy within the context of marriage. And we're going to talk about those boundaries. You saw in the video to begin with, and this is my fire pit. This is the fire pit I sit around. I don't know if you guys online, if you guys can zoom in just a little bit on it, you can see there's actually wood in there. That's what in there. We thought about lighting the fire, but didn't think that would work in here as well. But we're going to talk about the fire pit, the parameters of marriage, and why. You know, a lot of times we hear that conversation, but we don't understand the why. Why are there parameters? Because sex is a good thing. God created it as a good thing. Now, the reason this conversation, this talk is so important this weekend is because if we ignore God's guidelines, it's like the fire getting out of the fire pit. We've seen fires, and especially those of you here in Arizona, I know people from all over, but we've seen fires here in Arizona that get outside of the pit, and it becomes uncontained